All right, so we're gonna go and get started. Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. People online, thank you for showing up, and everybody here in live and in person, thank you for coming. This is our November meeting. Our agenda, we've done the dinner networking. We're gonna make some general announcements first. And then we're gonna stop off for a moment for some of our employee opportunities and recruiters, and then some general announcements, and then we'll introduce our speaker, and then he'll get straight into the topic. Okay, so we don't have any announcements other than, which at the end we'll announce again, but next month we're gonna have a panel here, a women's panel. It's gonna be good. So if you could show up in person or online, we're gonna bring some female professionals. They're gonna answer questions with the audience. So it'd be good if you guys even have anything in mind or any questions you'd like to post, send them to me or Dathan or anybody on the board, and we'll make sure it gets on the roster. What was the theme for that? Well, our theme is future readiness, kind of like, all the AI and things coming down, how does that change project controls? What does that look like? So we want to keep that theme moving forward, because that's where we're headed, right? So project controls is probably lagging and getting on board with some of the technology, but there's reasons behind that. So I won't get into a lecture on that. Job opportunities. So this is usually where we announce any job openings. If there's recruiters in-house, we'll ask them to stand up and provide any potential job opportunities that are out there. Usually Charlie's our guy that he usually emails out opportunities to a large audience. So Charlie, I want to give the floor to you, if that's okay.
I just recently received, it was yesterday, I believe it was, an opportunity. It was for two, not one, but two PCMs. They had some restrictions in specific needs, but I sent it out to about 150 people that I have on a list that are either people that I know that have been looking, may have been looking, or a similar heart to help others and forward on to help solve that problem. But if you are not on my list, please give me a call, 713-412-2278. Repeat, 713-412-2278, and I'll be glad to forward that email that I was sent out. But I just received another one that had a total of 5 different positions, including project controls manager, mechanical, several other disciplines other than project controls, but there are several in there. So I'll be glad to send it out. But as I have said many times, if it doesn't fit you, pass it on to somebody that may benefit. We all benefit from that. And it's not who I know, but it's who you know that can help somebody else in this time of need. So once again, I look forward to hearing from you via the phone. Text me and your email address, and I'm going to do it that way also. Thanks.
Okay, so if you guys didn't catch his phone number or email, just email me and then we'll get you connected to Charlie. He also helps update our website on these opportunities. So just if you're looking, stay tuned. Okay. And again, trying to get back to our old ways of dinner and networking. This was at the Hess Club. Currently, we're temporarily in my office, but we'll find a venue soon in the next few months and probably change venues. All right, so I want to introduce Jason Kimbrell. He's with Omega, and his topic, I'm not even going to try and introduce your topic, but it's what to expect when you're expecting cost engineering software And this discussion intends to answer those questions, provided best practice guidance and lessons learned for successfully implementing digital cost management solutions on projects. So I'm gonna let Jason do his intro, and I'll get out of the way and let you take it from here, Jason. Make sure it's up and running. Good to go. Go ahead.
Well, thanks for the introduction. My name is Jason Kimbrell. I hope everyone can hear me on the call. I hope you can see the screen. But this is my third time to speak to the AACE. So I'm very honored to be asked to come back. It's also the first time that I have been introduced without someone calling me a young professional. So I feel like in some ways that qualifies me for a promotion. So I think it's fair to say that we are living in the future, or at the very least, we're living in a transitionary period in our industry. For years, the hammer and nail of cost engineering, the tool that we use to do our job, the actual mechanics of how we manage cost, has been done in spreadsheets. Maybe we're lucky, we've got a database that we use as a repository for information, but by and large, we're still doing our jobs out of spreadsheets. And that's fine. Spreadsheets are great. I can manage a project that's $100,000 out of a spreadsheet, and I can manage a project that's $5 billion out of a spreadsheet. The reports will get done. I will give the advice to the project manager. I'll determine the reason for the variances. But everyone in this room knows that spreadsheets have problems. They're onerous. They take a lot of time and effort to update. They crash. We spend more time doing spreadsheets than we actually do cost engineering. So much that we're frequently known as that guy that works in the cubicle in the corner that knows how to make the thingy work. And we've looked at Primavera. We cost engineers have looked at our colleagues with Primavera, and we've wondered, where's our tool that can make our lives easier, supposedly? And to be fair, digital cost management solutions have been around since the 90s. We've had them. But it's only, in my opinion, until recently, in the last decade or so, that they've made advances in usability and accessibility that make them attractive options for cost engineers to actually manage cost on projects. And that is making them, attraction is making them rapidly adopted by organizations. And that rapid adoption is leading to this paradigm shift in how we actually do cost engineering. We're changing the things that we wake up in the morning and worry about because we're changing the tool that we're actually using to do the job. And with that change comes a lot of uncertainty. I'm a cost engineer. I don't like change. Project controls means no surprises. I don't want to change away from my spreadsheet. These are all things that I said in 2018 when I was on a project that piloted a cost tool at Shell on the Gulf of Mexico brownfield portfolio. I still remember my project controls manager coming to tell me, burn it. You don't need it anymore. You're going to be more efficient after this. And I had no idea what any of that meant. I had a lot of questions about the tool I was about to use, and I didn't get a lot of answers. So my goal tonight is to answer that for you. What do you actually get when you get a digital cost management solution? What does it offer you over the spreadsheets you might be using? If you have the tool, why aren't you using it now? What are the benefits that you might have? What should you expect? What should change in your daily job? What stays the same? And then if you're on an organization that's currently looking to implement one of these tools, what does an implementation actually look like? How do you get it from how do you go from using spreadsheets and your current processes to actually using a cost management tool. And then along the way, what are some best practices for how you can use the tool better? Before that, this is my about me, just to let you know that my CV kind of let you know that I know what I'm talking about. I started cost engineering in 2013. I've worked multiple projects at Shell, mostly in deep water, in LNG. In 2018, I was on a pilot team for Shell's ecosystem implementation. I used the tool for about 2.5 years. I left as kind of a subject matter expert in the group I was in. And then at the end of 2020, I joined Omega to actually work on cost tools. I kind of found that was my niche in project controls. And I spent the last year implementing PIM to cost with Chevron. So I've got experience being a user of these tools and also being on the other side. So let's kind of look at the basics. I come out of academia, and so I like to define everything before I talk about it. And because I know someone in the audience is going to say, well, actually, Excel is digital. When I say a digital cost management tool, I mean a project control specific piece of software that is for the express purpose of cost engineering and meets the guidance in our AACE recommended practice. If you didn't know that we have a recommended practice, we do, and it's actually pretty good. I recommend it. Yeah. But to be clear, when I say project control software, I'm not talking about Excel, if that's not clear at this point. It doesn't meet the AACE recommended practice. It's not specific to project controls. I'm also not talking about this. I'm not talking about SAP. I'm not talking about enterprise resource planning tools. These are finance tools. We use them. That's where we might say we've got a single source of truth. We might pull our actuals out of it. We might pull our commitments, but SAP is not a project controls tool. It's not going to give you an earned value unless it's got some functionality I haven't learned about in the last couple of weeks. And to provide some context on kind of why I say we're in a paradigm shift, just to give you an idea of where we've been. So this is a slide I used in a previous presentation, and it gives you an idea of early deliverables in cost engineering that we make every day. These are how they were made 200 years ago. So they've got a table of cost overruns, some financial curves, a work breakdown structure that's breaking things out between directs and overheads, which I find fascinating that in 1909 we were still trying to figure out how much owner's cost was a percentage of the base. But my point here is that we've been doing cost engineering for a long time, and the things that we do haven't really changed. We still make these tables every day. I made this table yesterday. So, but we do see shifts in the way we do this work. So we do this work by hand, and then by about the 1980s, computers become widely available, and we can start doing cost engineering through computers. Except we've been in this transition period before, and nobody wanted to use them. So as I was kind of researching this topic, I ran across this great article by John Lucas called "Computerizing the Cost Engineer Benefit or Value," in which he's trying to make this impassioned argument that we need to use computers in cost engineering. And it blows my mind that we're still having the same conversation, but we're doing it with cost software. Like, we as cost engineers do not want to change. The cost engineering profession in general has not embraced the use of the computer to the extent of other professions. I think it's because we don't like surprises, but this is kind of a trend for us. And this is just to use Excel, to use spreadsheets, to use tools on a computer. But we adopted them, and we've been using them for years. So now we're in kind of this third transition as far as how we do our job. We use cost software, and we will use cost software to deliver on our promises. So let's kind of talk about what it actually brings to us. Why are we making this shift? Cost software is dedicated to project controls. Unlike a spreadsheet where you have to build it every time, kind of have to put new features into it, cost software is a specific tool set. It's designed to help you do your job better. Cost management software standardizes your ways of working. It offers a way so that everybody's doing cost engineering the same way at your company, and in a way kind of can enforce that. One of the things that when I transitioned from working day-to-day cost engineering to working at Omega that I learned was that cost management is a subjective field. And I don't know why it took me 10 years to figure that out, but it is. We all do it a little bit differently. We all have different terminology for things. By standardizing the way that we're actually using our tools, we make it easier to come up to speed on projects, less time spent trying to back into what somebody else did. These tools have integration with other things that we already use, like P6 or ERP software, and so we can automate some of the more onerous tasks that we have. Less copying data from one spreadsheet to another, more actually analyzing what that data looks like. Software, unlike Excel, where a single instance of Excel is a workbook, right? And you may have different versions of that workbook. Cost software is on the same server, same kind of cloud. And so we have the ability to reduce some categorization efforts that we're frequently asked to do, like enterprise-wide reporting or benchmarking. Things that take us a long time to do, we can now mine data for, and it makes our jobs a little bit easier. And last benefit, if it breaks, we don't have to fix it. That's on us.
Do you take questions as you go, or do you wait to the end?
No, I'll take a question, sure.
Okay. One of the main benefits of the cost management software has to be single entry. That is an area
Exactly.
that causes so many problems, that you're having multiple entries on the same information. One cost engineer's got a variation orders log. Another one's got a separate variation order request log, and all these type of things. It's got to be the single entry, and by having the single system, that has to be one of the major benefits of single.
Yeah, and it's absolutely one of the game changers in how your life changes. Because it's single entry, you can actually do things like trending and change management in a more granular way. You're not having to go, copy down what your variance was, make the variance log. It's all on the same tool. There are a couple downsides to cost software. It is not as flexible as Excel. And it will never be as flexible as Excel because it's standardized. You standardize something, that's what you give up. You can't, but that's also a benefit. Change is unpleasant, and these software tools don't operate the same way that we do cost engineering now. You will have to change something about your job, and so that's going to hurt. I know I had to change the way I did my work. I cursed the whole time. The important thing is I didn't give up. And cost software is not a silver bullet for bad project controls. If your organization doesn't have good project controls, software could probably make it worse. At the same token, it can help you unify the way that you do your jobs, but it's not going to be push a button and here's my project.
Cost of goods. That's ever changing. How do you do that? How do you do that if something's set and it's just here and it's on the form and it says this is it and it says 1095? Well, now it must be 1595. Same thing.
Same way we do it now. We manage our baselines, we manage our estimates. So
you have to go in and implement it or make something happen.
right. So one of the things that does change, and maybe I'll kind of skip that one and kind of come down here, is this kind of idea of top down, less bottom up, and more details. So the way that cost software tends to work and how it kind of changes your life around is that tools like SAP or the way we kind of use Excel tend to have this kind of idea that we're going to have this cost. We're going to call it we're going to say it's a control account, but really it's just a bucket of money for a scope of work. And then as that scope of work kind of increases or decreases, we might draw down from a more general bucket. And cost software is meant to be kind of at this detailed level. So you build a detailed breakdown of your estimate and work breakdown structure. And then you can track changes against that using baselines. So as you change from month to month, you can see as you're shifting up and down. It's part of that kind of automatic thing, right? You can still track the variances the same way we do with Excel. It's just automatic. It flags it for you.
So if it went up 50%, and it's gonna go up 50% in 2 months from now, then, I mean, how do you deal with that? I mean, it's just automatically gonna kick it up 50%.
You're still going to have to make a decision about it going up. But you can make those decisions based on performance indicators that you get from earned value management, which is easier to do the way that cost software can handle details, as opposed to a spreadsheet where you might be measuring it at a higher level because it's just, that's the battlefield project controls.
Are you asking more of escalation in regards to escalation?
Yeah, I mean, escalation, escalation. I mean, I've seen steel go up. This year.
So
It's like.
so the way I track certain things like that. So being in an Excel spreadsheet, and correct me if I'm wrong, being in an Excel spreadsheet, if I have to track every individual line item, exactly what you're saying. Is I know this commodity changes, that commodity fluctuates. I've got geo parity, all these sorts of things. I have influence going to every single line item. The fantastic part I find with a lot of the cost management system, whether it's an ecosystem, whether it's a prism, whether it's however, whatever you want, you generally have the ability to start grouping those fluctuations and those geoparities or escalations to the different types of commodities. So all of a sudden you can now control how your costs fluctuate to a commodity rather than going individual line items. So make sure you don't forget things as well. Now, you're still going to have to look at whatever the changes are. Of course you are. I mean, whatever your contract is this month, maybe putting in labour rates a certain amount to next month, or there's a shortage, or I'm in the middle of the Midwest trying to find electricians and paying them, I might like I'm seeing that money to come and work on my particular project. Always makes me want to get back out of project management, project delivery, go back onto being an electrician, but that's fine. But so it's and being able to track and monitor those things. That all love about this runs into start looking at trend. Starts looking into your trend programs and find you cut into your change management program. So, and all these sets my baselines, and my baselines are always evolving. So when I say baseline, my estimating baselines always evolve. My data cube of cost for each commodity, for everything I'm tracking, but when I'm building my next estimate, I'm able to control it with a lot more vigor, there's a lot more control around it. And that's where the system will come into place. Now, I used to do that in the 90s, so we did all Excel too. Dealing back with cigarette packet. But so yeah, now I don't have to worry about missing different components.
And that's one of the things that to bring up that story I told about my project control manager telling me, bring a spreadsheet, you're going to be more efficient. What we kind of hear is this idea that your focus shifts from this data entry towards analysis. And if I were going to say that the number one thing that changes for you is you're spending more time on analysis, but analysis kind of gets presented like you're poring over these reports, and then you're writing like an English major report and you're handing it to a project manager. And that analysis really takes the shape of making those decisions about where that trend is going. It's determining a better estimate at completion, determining a better path that you're going down versus just trying to see where you've been. That's at least to me, that's the number one thing that changed when I moved to it. Now, that said, because it's top down, because I'm thinking of things as a whole, as opposed to like I'm going to go in Excel and phase out my costs and then hit sum and then sum up the cells to get my EAC. I can still do that, but these tools work better when you don't. It does take a little bit of change. It does take looking at these details, because the details are really where these tools start to drive change. It will make you more productive, but not at first. And that's part of it, right? These tools are different from what we're used to seeing. And so it's going to be a little bit of time to come up to speed with them. So this is what stays the same. You're still doing cost engineering. Hasn't changed. We're still doing trending. We're still doing variances. We're still looking at how we're going to end up at the end of the day. Just a different tool. Not everything is automatic. The automatic things in cost software tend to be the things that are kind of background noise. Then this is what I mean by that. So if you have a scope of work that's $5 million and your total EAC is $6 million, you're going to spend more time looking at that $5 million piece of work. You're going to manage that manually in some ways. You're going to do a lot more with hands-on with that scope of work. But the stuff that costs $200, the little change, you can set to be automatic. You can give it its own curves. You can let the system draw out how it's going to be phased and be smart about what you decide that you want to automate in your job. You're not going to kill every spreadsheet. They don't go away. You might use spreadsheets to load cost into one of these systems. More likely, you've got something that you're keeping on the side that's just easier to access. I used to keep a lot of SAP downloads just on the fly because they were quicker to access than out of my tool. Every spreadsheet doesn't go away. There will also still be ad hoc reports that you've got to do something with. And software will make you more efficient, but I think it needs to be said that it's not going to eliminate you. Your job doesn't go away because you got software. It will make your job easier, but it's not. It's more of an augmentation. We're just changing the tool. So from that, I think that's kind of what changes when you actually start using these tools. What I'd like to talk about is really if you're on the path towards implementing one of these tools, what does that implementation process actually look like? And through that implementation, what are some best practices you can take away? Why are you using a cost management tool, whether it's PIMS cost or EcoSys or Prism? So when I started on the Shell project, I didn't have a good idea of what that implementation would be like. And I also wasn't involved in every process of it. And so what I like about this chart that comes out of our recommended practice is it kind of gives you an idea of what every step of the way kind of looks like. I would make one slight revision to it, and that's that it's not necessarily a step, like a linear, I'm going to go here, 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 and here. It kind of kicks off, and then it's like this big loop. It's kind of a feedback loop as you start to use the software and you know what you want to configure with it. But typically, you'll start with a readiness assessment. And that readiness assessment is basically you doing a good old-fashioned kind of Kaizen. If you're familiar with like lean management, you're just going to go see what you're doing now, look at all the tools that you're using, all the inputs, the outputs. You put together a set of recommendations, talk to IT about what you can and can't do with software, because your organization will have different security requirements. And at the end of that, you'll send those requirements out to bid to a couple of software companies. They'll give you demos. You'll pick the one that's right for your organization, and then we'll move into this installation phase where the software developer comes in. We do a bit of scoping with you, understand your requirements, actually configure the software to work with your company. And then from there, you go into a pilot where you're piloting your software. Your team comes back, they say, yeah, this works, and then you go and you implement. It all sounds like it's a very easy process, and there's nothing to it. But what you kind of find is that organizations that have success with these tools make a lot of decisions during implementation that have ripple effects later on. And that first kind of ripple effect that I find is having right people in the room while you're doing this, any step of this implementation. You want to have a good mix of that's representative of the users of the tool, focusing on that practitioner that's going to be in the tool every day, And you also want to make sure you've got subject matter experts and management to play umpire so that the practitioners don't have some kind of battlefield project controls that they've used as a Band-Aid and want it in the tool. You also want to make sure you've got IT involved. We are not, as project controllers, IT people. We're project controllers. But IT can advise on some of the pieces that we don't know about. And then you'll have software developers and stakeholders, different people that you want to be able to see the tool to make sure that it's meeting their needs as well. Within your readiness assessment, kind of deep diving into that, your goal is to understand what your processes are before you even request a demo. One of the things that sometimes you see is that with implementations is that folks want to just kind of jump in to using the software without actually understanding what they're doing now, which is, I mean, it's fine, you're using the software, but you're likely to come in and say, hey, I need to go change this around and change this around and change this around. The whole point of this is to kind of understand what you actually need it to do before you even start looking. As you're kind of looking through your options, you'll put together your list of requirements. Those requirements kind of form the basis of what we'll do demos around as you shop around to different folks, software developers. We can even, if you're comfortable sharing things like work breakdown structures you already use, or dead projects or example projects, you can even have those demoed to you to see what your tool might look like using your data. But generally what happens is as you come to the end of this one, you'll do two things. You'll pick the software that you're going to go with, and they'll issue that purchase order, and that'll move us to that next stage. I think it's a best practice at this point to make sure you know the pilots that you're going to use when you actually implement the software. And picking pilots, you want something representative of your whole organization and probably more than one project. So 3 to 5 projects or portfolios that you can reliably say make up about 80% of the work that you do. Because different cost engineers do things differently, and someone that's working in turnarounds is probably going to do something incredibly different from someone that's working in subsea.
You're doing implementation from the software perspective. You know what the readiness should look like. And if the client doesn't have that in place, you don't have to say, you don't have your custom seeing, whether it's a WBS implementation by segment, or even some cost protocol.
It'll come out. So that next piece of that installation piece would be an installation and configuration. But yeah, I mean, we would point out, hey, do you have an example of this or an example of that if you haven't put it in that requirement, right? We have kind of boilerplate stuff that we'll do, but it's much easier if we have those requirements that where we can kind of tailor to what you need.
Jackson, just elaborate, just before you get into the detail, elaborate who are the right people. That's the one that I always have the loveliest arguments about.
In my who to include, I would include the project control management. So these are the people that are actually driving the best practices at your organization. They're the ones that kind of see the day-to-day, oversee the day-to-day cost engineers. You want the subject matter experts that can play umpire to everybody in the room. And then you want, at least in this stage, a good mix of your entire cost engineering community. Not everybody, because if it's too many, you're going to get too many requirements. But you want to have a good basis of the folks that are really doing that job. And then IT managers as well.
One I'd add to that is the actual end recipient.
Yeah. So
Because at the end, no.
Yes.
There's a different, no,
Are you talking from stakeholders?
I'm talking about people who are going to take the benefit of the cost manager or the cost team. Because the biggest, played around with a few different programs in different countries and companies. What I've found, unless you have those end users, and I say end users, the end recipients or the vendor of the system, you'll always get pushback in that system. So the current company I'm working with, it's quite interesting. I asked, they've introduced this new system. I'd never heard of it before. I got into it, I asked a few questions, and then I went, okay, the first person I want to talk to was the PMs, the project managers, and the guys who were delivering.
Mhm.
And I said, why did you choose this software? First, they said, we weren't involved. And so day one, you're going to learn something. Unless you have the people who this is actually going to benefit. Again, I totally agree. Project controls, when it's sort of day-to-day, absolutely, IT, yeah, all those important. But unless you're involving the people who are going to take the benefit of this, you're going to have trouble, especially to get it adopted.
Yeah. Absolutely agree. From that readiness phase, we kind of move into this installation and configuration. We'll do a scoping session. The software developer will do a scoping session with you to kind of understand those requirements, to get a better idea of what you need. And we'll take that, probably poke a couple of, try to poke as many holes as we can into it. Really try to understand everything that you need. We'll configure the tool for you based on those requirements. Part of that configuration is going to include things like what kind of dashboards and reports you're looking for. Also, kind of things like if you're going to do some special coding, right? So if you're going to try and use like the ISO 19008, which is a benchmarking code of accounts, that's where you kind of introduce that and how you want it to be shown in your software. We'll make some decisions here, things that IT can help you out with as well. So things like which software you want to connect to, whether you want to use like a direct access through some kind of API, or you want to use a data lake or data warehouse. And sort of as this is going on, it's going to overlap a bit, about 80% through, with your training and your pilot projects. And I say that it'll be when you're 80% through, because when the training and pilot projects start going, they're going to have opinions about what needs to kind of go into this. So it does become this kind of feedback. In this this kind of section, we start to kind of hear this term out of the box. At least I did a lot whenever I was implementing the tool, and I still hear it. So what does out of the box actually mean? Means that you're not going to customize or enhance the tool. You're going to take it off, to use another idiom, off the shelf, and you're just going to use it as it was intended to be used. And we, as software developers, tend to like that because it means that it's easier to fix bugs and to upgrade you. Every enhancement you do kind of locks you out of upgrades later because it means you specialize something to your organization. And so out of the box is typically cheaper for you and faster to get up and running than it is to do a massive amount of configuration. The reality is, though, that out of the box is just an aspiration. Typically, implementations are not 100% off the shelf. There's always something that we configure, such as if you have an advanced ERP interface that you have some business process requirements, maybe you have some inputs that are atypical, or some highly specific reports. Sometimes those are the kinds of customizations or advanced configurations that you might go with. There's a general principle: adapt to the software, don't adapt the software to you. You can run into a lot of trouble the more that you try to customize the software. You can make it into a real science project, and nobody will ever want to use it because it's been so specialized. The other thing to keep in mind during this phase, automation is a double-edged sword. Please use it wisely. You can very easily shoot yourself in the foot between these two things: adapting the software and automating. So one of the better automations that I've or configurations that kind of automated things for me that I really liked was around Shell doing a work breakdown structure that was standard to our portfolio. And so when we created a new project, it would just automatically populate a work breakdown structure. And all I had to do was go input my work packages and arrange the work as it needed to be. An automation that might not work very well is if you're relying on SAP to be your source of your work breakdown structure. We as cost engineers sometimes break work out into ways that SAP doesn't track, or maybe SAP tracks two work package, would create two work packages to track the same scope of work. Something you can do, it's nothing wrong with it, but SAP is still not a project controls tool. We'll move from there into user training and pilot projects. Typically that first training is done by the software developer. It'll involve a lot of stuff that is out of the box. It lasts about a week if I'm doing it. I like to do about 2 hours a day so that people can go do their job. But during that training, I think it's a useful kind of practice, especially kind of as you guys start to take on the tool and your own training as you roll the software out, is to kind of keep a running parking lot of items associated with that training. So it'd be like a parking lot built, it's a whiteboard that you split into 3 columns. One column would say to clarify, and that clarify column gives you stuff that you can put inside your procedures and your practices that you're likely going to need to shift around as you adapt software. You would have a column for enhancements, so that way you can kind of park conversation topics like, boy, it'd be great if the tool could do this that might derail training. And then another one for bugs, because the bugs will get fixed, but frequently I just find that you find bugs pop up in these things. The length of time that you're going to do the pilot is going to vary based on your organization. If you've got a large organization, it's going to last longer, probably include more projects. If you have only one project in your organization, your pilot is your project. I think there's a couple of things that pilot teams can do, and I think they're just great best practices for using cost management software. One is getting that project structure right. Cost software, typically, because it's based around this idea of kind of going from the top down rather than the bottom up, it bases a lot on how your project is actually structured. So what kind of control accounts are you using on a project? What kind of work packages are you using? Have you broken the scopes of work out to small enough pieces so that you can actually manage the variances that you're going to be asked about? Or have you broken them out too small so that you're swimming in details? That focus on project structure, if you can get that right, you'll have a good time using these tools. But that being said, don't be scared to mess them up, because the more that you break the tools, the better that we can make them, because we find issues with them. You can also learn through mistakes. And there's nothing that you can't fix later on, at least that I found. I've never found anything in this tool that it's so bad we have to completely blow something up. Run a spreadsheet in parallel for at least the first 2 cycles when you're adopting the tool. This is kind of a nice rule of thumb. One, it helps you because you get to run your spreadsheet and it's nice and comfortable. But 2, you get the answers in the back of the book so you can see if the software is actually doing what you want it to do. But if you find the software is getting the same answer, don't run it for more than 2 months. Abandon the spreadsheet or it'll become a crux. Speak up. If you're on that pilot team and you find that there's something that's going on, you don't like it, say something about it. One of the things that one of the mistakes that I made on the Shells pilot team, if I found that there was a bug in the software, instead of reporting it, I would find a workaround. And so what I found is that by the time we finished that pilot, I had a really kind of screwed up idea of how the software was supposed to work. And it turns out they're actually not built to be that complex to use. And then this is more aimed at organizations, have multiple super users and champions. An ulterior motive for this pilot, aside from knowing the software works for you, is to end by having some super users and people that other people can go rely on as you implement the software later. Don't be in a position where you only have one person that knows how the tool works and then that person leaves. because it's not pleasant. And then finally, you're ready to go. You've done your pilots. You can implement and roll out the software. Within this kind of phase, I think it's useful to have a plan that consists of two kind of broad things. One is a training plan so that you can bring other people on board and that you guys are running your own trainings. The other one is to have a kind of categorization for which projects are really candidates to use the tool that you just configured. I'm of the opinion that no project is too early in its phase to use project control software, but I think projects can be too late. So if your project's 5 years into execution, you got a year left, probably not a good idea to move them into the tool, even if it's for completion's sake. But earlier projects like these phase 1 projects, phase 2, phase 3, when you're just doing feed engineering or even before that, those are great because they never get the bad habits that spreadsheets build up. I think, so when you're ready, is a question I've kind of been asked, when am I ready to actually, we're gonna roll this software out. And I think these two questions, if you can answer yes to both of these, you're probably ready. One is your data the same? So if you're doing work in a spreadsheet and you're doing work in the tool, if the data is the same, I think you're ready. Right? We know the tool works. Can you perform the most critical tasks to cost management? So can you go through the tool, do changes, perform a month close, go through your entire reporting cycle? Maybe you have to use Excel or some other tool to do a monthly report, but you can get the job done within the tool. I think you're ready at that point. I would add probably one extra one in here that I left off, is that do you have the training in place? Is there a documentation and something that someone can rely on so that if they have questions about it, they know what to do? And as you roll that out, it's useful to have some active metrics to measure success. So maybe not just counting the number of users of a tool or the number of projects in that system, but thinking about who was active in the last 30 days or the number of projects you have that actually closed a cycle last month. This kind of gives you an idea of not just the kind of spectrum of what your tool is doing, but also gives you an idea of just how successful, how much people are using it. And then with that, that's I think what you have to expect when you're expecting a cost management system.
Questions? I think there's people online who want to ask.
I have a question.
Yes.
What is, if you have a general productivity differential between, like, when you're saying running parallel
Mhm.
and drop one, so if you had to say what's obviously the time that you're spending putting the data through the system versus the analytical time before and after, you know, kind of roughly in general what the differences are?
It's almost a subtle shift. So I mean, think, if I had to kind of put time on it, I would have spent an entire day loading actuals into a spreadsheet. And that's all I would have done during that day is I would have gone to my spreadsheet, copied the data from SAP, put it in the right cell, do a formula so that any of the variances for the next month get reversed out. So I'd hold the EAC. Within these tools, you can do that instantly. That kind of savings, I'd say you're really getting to like, 4 or 5 days a month that you were previously spending on kind of this data entry and fixing stuff that you're now spending on this analysis. And that's like an off the top of my head thing. It's not scientific. It's just me thinking about what I actually saved when I
We used to
was.
see 20%. Remember, and also on the user side, so whenever we would implement something, we'd see 20% of time. And what was actually more so it was better was the fact that that 20% time that we gained, we actually spent more time analyzing data. And that was the key. If I can stop being a desk job or a database job and actually spending time and actually doing what project controls will get paid the big money for, should other people get that big money. Yeah, so that was where we found it. So you might spend 20, if I could spend 20%, if you could think, if you spend 20% more of your time analyzing data now than you were before, it's got to be tenfold.
I will say though, that it is, if you're running that spreadsheet in parallel with the system, it can be it is very painful. And I had some colleagues that I know did that, and even years into the implementation. I mean, I've been on the Chevron implementation for about a year. I'd say we've been doing that in earnest for maybe 8 months. They're very close to the done. At Shell, the Gulf of Mexico brownfield one took about 6 months before I would say I was using the tool every day.
Richard, you have
Yeah, just curious, out of the box solutions now. I think better, I mean, more, I mean, I can remember looking at ecosystem when it first came out, you opened the box, and had the most spectacular possibilities, but there were no built-in functionality. First came out. Basically, open the box and hire different systems to build the system, right? So I'm assuming they're a lot better as far as functionality built in, following some.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've gotten a lot better. I mean, I can tell you that. So when I joined Omega, I mean, I've seen what our tool was like before I joined. We were on a Windows version of Omega, Penn's Cost, and then we moved into a web version that is such an entirely different user experience, both in like the functionality of what it can do, and then how you actually interact with it. That, I mean, it's like they're two entirely different systems. And that was done, I want to say, within the last 3 years. So it's a rapid advancement.
How much training of the managers? Not training of the practitioners, training of the people that are gonna start getting the reports. And how to use it.
So when you say managers, do you mean like the
Project managers,
like the project managers?
The end recipient.
I haven't been doing much training with the end recipient. So with my job, I'm typically working with the practitioners. I would say it's probably, I'm probably not the best person to be able to answer that question within Omega.
So Omega doesn't have a standard
No, we,
offering to teach the managers how to use these reports and start seeing the system.
no, we do. I'm just not the best person to answer that question because I typically work with practitioners as a cost specialist.
The short answer is not enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's my experience, because most of the time they don't know what to read.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's my biggest issue. So with all the teams that I have with multiple clients, my first question is, have you been shown what this does? And I've gone to engineering managers and said, all right, here's all your deliverable base, here's how we're doing the management, here's how we're going to do all our progress improvements, all this sort of stuff, showed them gating systems, showed all those sorts of things, and they go, wow, why? What does this mean? I'm like, sorry, hang on, you've never done this before? One guy was an engineering manager for 32 years. And I said, oh, show me the system. I'm not going to give you my updates. I said, why not? You're just beating me over the head with it when I'm wrong. I'm going, wait a minute. No, I'm on please. My job is here to help. Exactly. Well, and it took me several months just to convince the guy, look, let me show you. I'll work with you. I'll say, you can blame me if it's wrong. Right? And when we got to work with it, he started to understand, hang on, this is actually helping me predict and helping me answer questions I know I'm going to get. And then all of a sudden, he's now the first person who comes and knocks on my door and says, it's update day tomorrow. Can you see? Can I talk to you now? Because I've got it on you again. I mean, it's fantastic. But so this is where I'd love to see with all that, is the software, any type of system you put in place, whether it's cost management software. I mean, everyone knows P6. Everyone can spell P6, but they don't know what it means or what it does or what it shows. I know it's my scheduling software.
if it's red, it's bad.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my favorite one is, oh, do you know what about earned value management? Absolutely. Explain it to me. And I bet you people, 1 out of 10 can explain actually what it means.
It's just 3.
Yeah, exactly.
But even that, but it's what it means and what it can do for you. And that's where I think is missed. There's a business idea there, Jason. Just teach people how to use the software.
What I'm hearing here is the project managers, if they were more engaged in this, they would know what else could, I mean, they probably have a need that hasn't been spoken yet. If you're only talking up to project control teams as your the highest level, and the project manager said, you could hear that gasp, I could do this, I can get this information, I can get it earlier. So getting buy-in from those people.
The best project managers, project directors are ex-project control people.
Yes,
Time and money.
agreed.
I don't think when anyone says, I'll argue, sell black and blue, time and money is where it comes in. Doesn't matter how well you mention your job, you're not allowed to kill anyone, by the way, that's just a given, I'm not even argue that, but if you can control your time and money, then you will win. It's simple.
Just building on that, I mean, the big stumbling blocks I've seen in implementing software, and unfortunately, I've seen some really, tough implementations that have some big problems, and it's always around managing the change, which means managing the expectations of the stakeholders. And it also in terms of who's in the room, how often they're in the room, because developers go away or the experts go away and they do something and they come back and say, oh, it's finished, but no input in between.
I'll take it one step further. Understanding expectations from the user is the biggest thing for me. But it's actually getting that user to understand his own expectations. Like, I expect it to do this, this, and this. Great. Do you know what this, and this means? And what can it do to benefit you? And how can you use it? But simple questions. So I drive a car to work every day. I don't know how it all works, but I know I can get in, I can drive it. But I have an expectation that it's going to get me where I want to go safely and in a certain amount of time. It's the same thing. I don't need to know what's under the hood. I just need to understand, how can I use the tool, or how can I use the product from the tool? You'll have to forgive me, I get sidetracked.
I'm kind of thinking that your project manager, I mean, this is all the reason for dashboards. You've got, the specialists, the planners, the cost engineers, they're all hired to be the users, to go into that detail and flag things. Or if there's a dashboard that will flag those things which are at the top end, that's a project manager shouldn't be going in learning all. Yes, they should understand all the terminology and what's being presented to them, but it's the key performance indicators that they're seeing on dashboards, and it's all that aggregation of information that the cost engineer or the planner's done for the project manager to go in and just look at his dashboards and okay, crap, it's red.
But understand what he's reading.
Yeah,
absolutely.
so it's getting that aggregated information to in the right level, so that he can take that holistic or helicopter approach to
and he can dig in where he needs to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be an expert. I'm not an expert of how my car works, but if there is something wrong or a red light,
we feel it, right? Yeah.
I know red or right. You're even better. You feel it.
Yeah.
How many times have you gone to a project manager who's like 6,000 years old? He walks up and goes, "That's going to be 4 weeks late." How the hell do you know that? We haven't even started. I've been there before. I've seen it. I know exactly what's going to happen. That contractor's going to do that. He's going to blame him, and all of a sudden that delivery, it's not going to work. And you sit there going, no. Then all of a sudden, 6 weeks later, he goes, "Oh,
I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that the solution that we are implementing right now with Chevron is it's a full Omega 10 suite. So it's not just cost. I tend to focus on cost because that's what I do. I'm a cost specialist, so I work with the practitioners and stuff. But it does touch everybody. So for example, we do have a management of change suite that we've implemented, and they're definitely involved in that. I've done training with that. But just to be clear, I mean, that's what I do. I'm more of a specialist with project control. That's my experience.
All right, guys.
a couple of questions. I see the 6 in the chat. So,
I've been chatting
Okay.
making sure that they didn't have any questions. I want to thank Jason, this is your gift you brought tonight. Shane gave him the gift, and then that one's for you. Thank you for, photo. Thank you for presenting. You still trip. Thank you guys for showing up.
Make sure you
Hey,
get it in the collection.
Yeah, that's why I waited.
Take some sandwiches, please, because there's a bunch left over. Guys online, thank you for joining.
Guys online, you can't have it.
And we'll mail you the sandwiches.
Yeah.